What if I told you that one of our greatest strengths as men actually lies in our ability to be vulnerable, to show who we really are, to reveal our authenticity? Today we're going to kind of talk about how vulnerability is actually a strength, even though that may sound like a paradox. It's actually in our ability to be flexible that we find strength. It's actually in our ability to be vulnerable and to show who we really are. That actually attributes towards a sense of power. I think that as men, we've been taught not to show emotion and not to be vulnerable with others. And I'm going to read a little bit here from this is Brene Brown's book, Daring Greatly. So love her or your hater, she makes some incredible points in this book. So I'm just going to read a little bit of what she has written here, and we'll kind of dive into it as well. To believe vulnerability is weakness is to believe that feeling is weakness. To foreclose on our emotional life out of a fear that the cost will be too high is to walk away from the very thing that gives purpose and meaning to living. And so with that, we can kind of dive in here a little bit. I think the first thing to really understand when it comes to this idea of vulnerability and emotions, especially in relation to men or healthy masculinity, is that I know for myself, I grew up in a culture that is predominantly against the idea of men showing emotions. I grew up with sayings such as boys don't cry, man up, and some other more vulgar sayings as well. And I think that I just remember as a child, anytime having the feelings of crying around my friends, I immediately wanted to hide that from others because I typically would get shamed. I would get made fun of for crying. Don't be a sissy, don't be a wuss. I remember I hurt my knee really bad in middle school with one of my friends, and he was making fun of me for being injured, and I wanted to just like let out a scream and cry, but I was also really holding that in because I didn't want to be made fun of by him. And looking back on that situation, maybe that wasn't the best friend to be hanging out with, but I think that sort of speaks to perhaps the culture that maybe you relate to as well of growing up in. If you feel lost, if you feel that you've noticed certain behavior patterns in your life and you're unsure of where they come from, like getting belligerently angry all the time, or if you feel completely cut off from yourself, or even if you feel suicidal or just like deep immense of loneliness, chances are that there's a disconnect between you and your emotions. And this comes typically from an early age. I'm talking ages, like 0 to 10. And during this time in early infancy, it's okay for children to cry. In our culture, it's okay for children to laugh and to be playful and to express their emotions. But then comes a certain time, many parents and or teachers or other individuals in our society will then see a child who's expressing emotions and shame them for it. And it also comes at an expense within even the developmental framework of a child as well. So if we think about the needs of a child, there are several needs. A child, especially in early infancy, they're not able to take care of themselves. A child needs to learn how to be accepted by their caregivers in order to get basic needs met. A child needs food, a child needs water, a child needs love and acceptance. And the child will learn how to manipulate themselves to get acceptance. A child learns at a very early age that there are some particular behavior patterns that are acceptable in the family unit and some particular behavior patterns that are unacceptable in the family unit. And this goes the same with emotions as well. So the child learns that their parents start rejecting them when they exhibit certain emotions, whether it be anger or contempt or sadness or some kind of behavior pattern even that the parents don't approve of. The child doesn't see that as, oh, mom and dad just aren't accepting of me and maybe they need to go get some help in therapy or 12-step. The child sees that as, oh my God, my parents aren't accepting me right now. Therefore, my survival is at risk. And so what Gabor Mate says so eloquently is that the need for survival, the need for acceptance in the child is greater than the need for authenticity. And so what that means is that the child will then learn to sacrifice themselves in order to garner approval, in order to garner validation. And so if you've ever exhibited, for instance, like nice guy behavior patterns, a huge part of this stems from those early childhood dynamics with primary caregivers, especially with the mother. If there wasn't a mother in the house, of course, there's approval seeking that comes with the father or other primary caregivers as well. But I know it's very common for a lot of men to have very intimate and close relationships with their mother to a point where they literally became good little boys, good little surrogate husbands in order to be accepted and to be loved. And as children, that's okay. That's just kind of part of the natural process. But what ends up happening is that long term, that creates an unhealthy survival mechanism inside of the adult, where now we have young boys who have turned into adults but haven't left that early behavior pattern of seeking approval. And so if you're a man and you're feeling consistently lost in life, or you're constantly looking for others to fill you up in some way, chances are that there's a disconnect from the authentic core of who you really are. And to get out of the theory a little bit and to kind of get into some more practicality, basically what Brene Brown is saying here is that that authentic core is our emotions, our emotional body. It's okay for us as men to cry, to laugh, to be joyful. And I know for myself that if I cut myself off to maybe some of those more uncomfortable feelings, then I also cut myself off to joy. Because once my heart is closed to those uncomfortable ones, it's not opening up. It's not going to open up when good ones come either. It's just going to kind of remain stuck. It's going to remain stuck and shut and kind of in like a stone casing. And I know for myself, my process is continuing to learn how to open the heart, even in the midst of uncomfortable emotions. And quite honestly too, the work I do with men and the work I've done with myself, when finally we have a point where a man is able to crack open and actually get a good cry, there's a lot of joy that comes with that typically too. It's like, oh my gosh, where has this flood of emotion been my entire life? And I truly do feel that flood of emotion is typically what we're seeking a lot of the ways in the external world, through addiction, through seeking money, through seeking sex. I think that there are many behavior patterns that are an attempt to fill this hole inside, when in reality, this hole is just created due to the inability to feel what's really going on inside of the human heart. And so this is the process, once again, of reconnecting our head to our heart. It's the journey of moving back into and embodying who we really are. It's embodying that inner child. And so inner child work is some really deep work that you can do of reconnecting with those early emotional states that we may have had as children. And so I'm just going to take a quick sip of my coffee here. Something about vulnerability and the paradox of this too is that in order to, there's a distancing here that occurs, that perhaps we have this deep desire and this deep need to connect with others, but we also have this fear of being seen because we don't accept who we really are. And the emotion that goes about sort of not accepting who we really are is the emotion of shame. Shame is an emotion that is all about hiding. That's something that my dad actually taught me. And I actually really agree with that shame is an emotion of hiding, of getting small. Shame is the emotion of saying that who I am at my core is unlovable. And ultimately, when we come down to the basics and the simplicity of this universe, if we are unlovable, then we are unable to connect with that of which we really are, which is love. And so the process is then learning to accept who we are. It means accepting this present moment. And quite honestly, it's the process of even self-talk inside of the brain. Learning to be gentle to oneself, learning to talk to oneself in a way that perhaps we would talk to a child who's in need of support. You know, if a child is learning to walk, we don't go over and hit the child every time they fall over, go and shame the child. Yet perhaps that's how maybe some of us are treating ourselves whenever there's a mistake that is made, or some sort of prevention from failure in some cases. And so if a child is learning to walk, you encourage the child, you speak to that child, you let the child know they're doing a good job, and you trust that eventually that they'll get there. And it's not the process of braiding and shaming. So learning that self-talk is really critical inside of oneself. And even back to the point here of recognizing the contrast between seeking connection but also afraid of being seen. It's kind of like this strange sort of paradoxical bind that occurs in the human psyche. And really this once again comes down to the process of learning to love and accept oneself. Mirror work is a great practice where you can stand in front of a mirror and just stare yourself in the eyes and really just let yourself know that you love yourself and that you're doing a good job. And it may feel weird at first, but eventually you may come to recognize and realize that this practice can be very profound. I do this from time when I'm brushing my teeth, or if I just see myself a quick glimpse in the mirror, I'll just kind of like give myself a little eye contact and say, I love you. You're doing a good job. I'm proud of you. And these are all things that I need to hear on a consistent basis from myself. Of course, it's great to hear them from the external world as well. However, who I really do need to hear it from is from me. This is the process of becoming one's own parent. And so within this process of vulnerability, it doesn't mean, as Brene Brown talks about, it doesn't mean just going and exposing ourselves all the time in a raw and emotional state, because that can actually be more damaging to us. It can be really damaging not to be in a safe or comfortable environment and sharing ourselves. I know when I go out and I express myself emotionally and I'm not received in a way that's held, it kind of causes me to shut down even a little bit more. And so it's really important to find safe spaces like working with a coach or therapist one-on-one. I am currently taking on clients. If you're currently looking for somebody, you could also find a men's group. There are WhatsApp groups. You could start your own group. And then also 12-step is a really incredible resource as well. ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families, is an incredible program that's doing a lot of work around rediscovering one's emotional truth and doing some of that deeper work and understanding those early developmental emotional schemas that occur inside of the psyche due to trauma and due to early conditioning with the relationship between caregivers. I really do recommend checking that out as a resource. That's completely free to go to as well. There's a bunch of online ACA groups and a bunch of online men's groups too. If you're interested, I'm happy to connect you as well. I think that something else to really understand here is that there is an attempt inside. It's important to understand that the judgment, yes, it may come from the external world, but the judgment that really does damage is the judgment one does to oneself. And it's sort of like we allow others to treat ourselves how we treat ourselves and how we've been treated in the past. And so what this work is it's understanding what has happened to us in early childhood, parents, caregivers, and understanding how we've gotten to where we've gotten to today based on what's happened to us. And quite honestly, it's learning how to feel again. And I'll say that for me, learning how to be emotional with other men, I just got off a call last night with a men's group that I'm a part of, and being around other men, older men, younger men who are doing the work, who are feeling into their emotions is one of the most beautiful things. And I actually feel so connected to this group of men, not because we're sitting there, shooting the shit about the Bears game or about football, or we're actually getting real with each other and we're talking about what happened in our early childhood development, and we're crying together and laughing together, and that really is that connection. And so once again, back to this paradox that if you want to feel connected to other people, there is that risk of being seen, and learning to hold oneself in a way that even if you are rejected, that's okay. Brene Brown says that courage is a prerequisite to vulnerability, that it wouldn't be vulnerable if there wasn't some level of fear associated with showing yourself or having some kind of emotion. That's a big part of it as well. I know for myself, even in romantic relationships, it can be difficult for me to show who I am. And that's not the case with every single person, but I do know with a lot of the clients that I work with that exposing oneself to their romantic partner in a way that it doesn't seem to fit within the paradigm that we've been handed as children. Like, how could I cry in front of my romantic partner, especially me being in a heterosexual relationship, but of course this applies to any relationship or sexual orientation, that how could I cry in front of a woman and how could she feel safe around me? But the paradox there is that a romantic partner is going to feel safer with somebody who's able to express who they actually are. And there's something so powerful and so beautiful about watching a grown man break down into tears and the amount of courage and strength that it actually takes to feel one's emotions. And so I think there have been talks in the past from certain predominant figures in the men's space who I disagree with, that trauma is used as a fuel towards creating your life or your dreams. And I just don't agree with that. I think that our wounds can be our greatest teachers, but I don't think that that's the point that's being made. I think that the point there is to sort of enact the trauma and let that shame fuel you into creating something to try and give yourself a sense of self-worth. And what I'm acknowledging here is to go back into the wound and just to feel what's going on to allow yourself to be devastated, to mourn and to grieve one's own childhood, the father wound, the mother wound, and to allow oneself to actually feel what's going on in your body. And I even encourage you, if you have an opportunity right now, to just kind of like check in, just to see, what are you feeling right now? Where is there tension in your body? Is there a tightness in your chest or shoulders? How do you experience emotion? Getting comfortable with that. My work with men has traditionally been just reconnecting one back to one's emotions and crying together and laughing together. And it really is that process of that reconnection to that sense of vulnerability. And I really do think that that's what we're seeking. Is it's great to go and look into the external world to try and find answers, but really everything we know is right here. It's within the heart, and what we're looking for is actually inside of us. And to remember that, and it is that process of remembering that. And I mean that remembering process even in the sense of like coming together again, the remembering, the literal sense of the word, to bring something back together again. So a few practical steps to start would be, one, if you have somebody in your life who you feel you could share yourself with, I think that'd be really important. I also think that that's why people pay coaches or therapists, is because they have that safe space, and especially therapists as well. It's confidential, and there's, legality that binds the two together in a way that creates even more safety around confidentiality. Also making sure that you're working with a trained professional. If you're looking for somebody, perhaps like a somatic therapist, somebody trained in internal family systems, any psychodrama or psychodynamic work is going to be very valuable as well. Jungian analysts are also a great resource too. If you don't have the money, like I mentioned, going to 12-step groups. This is an incredible opportunity to really work on that program and enter into a safe space of recovery for yourself and recover your soul. And then also journaling is a really incredible way to just connect with yourself again and to really find out what's going on. Just setting a timer for 10 minutes, or even doing writing for 3 pages, just free writing, whatever comes to mind, just nonstop stream of consciousness writing. Could be a great way to even process some of these emotions as well. And then getting back in touch with your emotions. Quite honestly, I really am in the camp of we heal together in community. It's so much easier for me to touch my emotions when I'm around other people who are doing the work, because I'm able to relate with them and hear their stories, and it cracks me open more so than when I isolate and go hide by myself. And so just wanting to acknowledge that, we heal in community, and it really is important to find a safe community where you can express yourself and be who you really are, so you can have a little bit of support in your life to then launch into all areas of your life as well. That is I feel a good place to stop for today. So if you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing, that would really help this page to grow and help others as well. And then I do and am currently taking on clients. It's filling up soon. So if you would like to work with me one-on-one, go ahead and click that link in the description to schedule a free call. And then we can talk about what that would look like working together. Other than that, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.